This I wanted to ask you this. I don't know if it's out of your wheelhouse or if you want to go there, but certainly Tom DeLonge has been in the news this year too, and he made this big announcement last month with the launch of To the Stars, and selling stock in the company, and he's got a pretty star-studded list of people standing behind him with this company. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I find it actually kind of hilarious that, in effect, that was an official disclosure, and it kind of came and went in a matter of like a day. It hasn't had a long tail. Having a group of credible officials come forward and say UFOs really do exist is not new. And just because they tried to do it and they got a big link on Huffington Post, sorry, there was the Disclosure Project in 2001. Robert Hastings did his whole thing back in 2010 where he was talking about, specifically focusing on UFOs over nuclear missile installations and powering them down.
That's right.
There's been so much disclosure. There's been, shows like yours and shows like Coast to Coast. What I've been doing, it's old hat. It's like been there, done that. Yep, there's lots of insiders who've come forward, and this is just the latest one. And then the thing is, I think the really hilarious part is that if you don't actually have compelling new information, then everybody just yawns, right? New information isn't just names. Like, you can't just pick out a bunch of new names and say, well, this guy is the head of so-and-so, and this guy was Lockheed Martin, and this guy was Department of Defense. You can't just have a bunch of new names and then make a totally boilerplate, boring statement like, yep, we think that there's UFOs that are real out there. Nobody even cares now. Like, it's about, is your information contributing to the narrative in a way that hasn't already happened? So on the break, I was on the Smithsonian website, and there is this thing about this cigar-shaped asteroid, quote-unquote, moving through our solar system. So now that's new information. That's the kind of thing that takes it to the next level. But again, the very bizarre aspect of the Tom DeLonge story that must be addressed is the fact that all of this disclosure initiative that he has gotten involved in was coming from Hillary and John Podesta. And Hillary is out there saying, we call it unidentified aerial phenomena now,
Mm-hmm.
And so what it's starting to look like is that this is the manifestation of what so many briefings have told us, namely that they meaning, the cabal people, of which I think everybody can agree Hillary is definitely part of the cabal. Their plan was, when they really are in trouble, that they're going to flip the switch on disclosure. And so now these guys, with, one of the most famous musicians of the 1990s, the lead singer of Blink-182, they were hoping that they could sort of commandeer the entire UFO movement and then gain more credibility than anything else that's already happened. And I think they grossly underestimated this audience, because this audience already knows a lot more than what mainstream media has been portraying. And so therefore, that disclosure announcement really was almost a non-event. Instead of it being some epic thing that steers the narrative over to them, and now they become the only people that anybody wants to see as being serious. So the cabal is confounded by their inability to structure and shape the narrative. And one of my insiders told me a long time ago that the most valuable thing to the cabal, the single most valuable thing, it's worth more than any amount of money they can print out of thin air. The one thing that they want the most is the ability to influence millions of people. And the same guy told me, David, never let any of these guys undermine you or your value, because what you're doing is something they can't do. Like, Tom DeLonge was the lead singer of the most famous band of the 1990s. I don't think it's had anywhere near the kind of impact of what I've been doing over the last 20 years. It kind of came and went, and it's not just me, it's others who have done the homework, right? We're journalists, we're researchers. We've been doing this all our lives. We didn't just get picked up by John Podesta and a bunch of top brass and are used as what most people probably would think of as like a puppet. And I want this thing to be cool, okay? I want it to be something amazing, but I think the audience is very cynical, and I think you can't just take a musician who doesn't have a history of being a public UFO researcher and throw him into that role and have that then take over people who have been doing this for 20, 30 years, of which there are several names. Linda Moulton Howe, great example.
Right.
Linda Moulton Howe is probably, I would say without any hesitation actually, she's the number one female ufologist. And that's the kind of person who brings out a story and shapes the narrative.
You can almost take female out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, she's been doing it way longer than I've been doing it. And she's
true.
at all the events, she's in Ancient Aliens just like I am all the time. And we've branded. The UFO movement already has its main speakers. And you go to these events and you see who they are because they keep showing up year after year after year after year after year. And so if somebody new tries to barge into that, good luck.
Well, do you think that okay, I'm just going to be very direct, and DeLonge is probably listening to this right now, but I'll say this. Do you think it would have been more successful if DeLonge wasn't the front man here? If he wasn't the spokesperson, if he wasn't the face of this, that maybe they should have had somebody else speaking for To the Stars?
Well, I don't know. I met the drummer for Blink-182, Travis Barker.
Yep, amazing.
At Erewhon, the health food store. And I talked to him, and I think that, things with Blink-182 ending didn't go very well, because he kind of had there was a couple things that happened that were a little odd. Because basically Tom DeLonge kind of dissed the band to really get into this UFO stuff, and I think they weren't very happy about that. So in a sense, it is heroic that he turned his back on what could be a very successful career where, just like the Rolling Stones or Aerosmith or somebody like that, you could go on doing concerts the rest of your life and live a wealthy existence.
No question about that. None.
And you don't, anybody, this, Jimmy, anybody out there who is one of these haters who thinks that we're cashing in on this stuff, you couldn't be more mistaken. It's almost impossible to make a living as a truth journalist. And even some of the most respectable truth organizations, I'm not going to name them, but they are bleeding and hungry, and I've been getting a bunch of emails lately from one organization in particular, and it's like, wow, these guys are desperate. So, could it have been better if they used somebody else? I don't know. It's too old school, though. I got to tell you.
Yeah, I know. It feels a little funky.
I would love for Tom DeLonge to reach out. He has 3 different people that know me. He can get my number. He can call me. He can talk to me. So nobody ever tell me that he doesn't have a golden road to talk to me, because he does.
Sure.
And I'm not gonna disrespect him at all if he wants to talk. But here's the thing. Doesn't it look like you have a guy who's just been handed this information on a platter, told what to think, told who to trust, and hasn't had necessarily the time of being a public figure where you're ripped apart on the internet, where you have to deal with the fact that now hundreds of thousands of people despise you right? That's just part of the job. And then you have to go up and down with it. You have to see the booms and the busts. At one point, you capture a certain story and everybody's paying attention, and then next thing you know, you're like obscure and it goes back and forth. And all of those vagaries in terms of being a self-oriented, self-generated seeker, nobody's paying for you. You're not getting any money on the side. There's no special interest group financing you. You have to do this out of love. You have to do this in the midst of almost complete bankruptcy, and you're searching for the information. So the people who have become figures in this field that are recognized, they did that because they came up from the streets. They did that because they figured out how to make this work. They figured out how to survive the staggering power of hundreds of thousands of people hating you with a passion that they normally would only have for their own family members.
Right. It's so prevalent.
It looks too easy, right?
It seems
Here's a guy who's a multi-millionaire because of his band, and so he's always going to be okay. He always has a safe place to land, and then these guys come to him and they just lay it all out there, and that's generally not going to work.
Is it a red flag? Is it a red flag?
I think so, because what I think what our audience is looking for is a track record, a legacy. They can go back and they can see, what were you doing in 2012? What were you doing in 2008? What were you doing in 2004?
Right.
I have an audit trail that goes back to 1996.
Mm-hmm.
You can online audit me year by year since 1996 and see what I was talking about, what I was doing. And, so if somebody has been a pop star and then all of a sudden all these insiders approach them, and it includes John Podesta, and Podesta is with this guy as he's going to these briefings, and now what we've learned about Podesta, this is very disturbing. It's not a good thing to be working with John Podesta. Now, that doesn't mean that Podesta did anything bad with him, but what it does suggest is that the things we've learned about Podesta could be correlated with why this happened.
Right.
And, so what I would love to do, actually, is to have Tom DeLonge even acknowledge that he's not the only one doing this and start to talk to us, not just me. Talk to any of the other people. Don't just have it be your show, dude. Bring some other people in. Bring in Linda Moulton Howe. Start to talk to people who have been doing this for a long time, who can exhibit critical thinking, and perhaps question the people that are giving you your information. Because the one thing I've learned after all these years is you can't just take what people give you. You've always got to do your due diligence, check it, see if it makes sense, see what other people are saying, compare it to other things, and then you also have to have time. Because generally the fakers will reveal themselves fairly quickly. And so if he's fairly fresh in this, and he's only been speaking to these people for a few years, he hasn't really had the time to see if there's a deeper agenda, to see if they set him up, to see what happens when he really starts to get in the public eye. And then, did the things that they promised him actually happen, or does he get betrayed? And that's where somebody like Linda, with all those years of pedigree and experience, she's not just going to take what somebody feeds her, and that's probably why they didn't approach somebody like her or somebody like me with an idea like this. Because we're going to ask too many questions, we're going to be looking for outside validation, and we're not just going to want to have a whole story dropped in our hands and just accept it. Now, maybe he's doing that, okay? Maybe he has done that critical thinking. But the problem is, all we've had is a couple little press conferences. He's not going to events. He's not speaking to anybody else in the field. He's not on panel discussions. He's not doing the stuff you have to do to earn your stripes as a veteran of the UFO community. That's the problem.
I think,
and he'll probably never speak to me now after me saying all this. I'm sorry, but
well, see, this
get involved, dude. Step in. It's not just you have to join with others who are on the same battlefield. We're only going to win this together. I constantly am citing other sources. That's one of the greatest things I think about my work, is how I try to synergize what other people are doing, and I always give them credit whenever possible. And so it's not just one person. And unfortunately, a lot of people in this field tend to try to be an island, and that doesn't work. Synergy is how we're going to win this war, bringing all the efforts together and putting them all on one page.
I think he is very well researched, though. I mean, he's well aware of you and Linda. I mean, the first time that I contacted him, which was, a couple of years ago, he was just straight out very aware. The eyes have been open.
Cool.
He's been studying this subject for a long time.
Then why, after I've made 4 public calls for him to reach me, do I hear nothing but crickets?
Okay, well, we'll deal with that part tomorrow. Okay. Okay, but
if you want to bring him on the show and me on the show at the same time, I'm totally down.
Sure,
and I will be nice to him. I'm not. All I'm saying is I think he himself needs to ask some questions about what might be the agenda, and is he being used for something that they're not telling him? That's what I think he needs to ask.
Well, I've been very direct with him on that subject. And, I mean, obviously, when we look at the different disinfo campaigns by, the Air Force and the Navy over the years with the UFO agenda, taking advantage of people inside of the community, this is something that we are all aware of. Certainly, he must be aware of the possibility of him being played. That's got to be first. If that isn't first and foremost on his frontal lobes, then we've got a bad problem here. So hopefully he is thinking that every step that he takes on every single day. Otherwise, it is meaningless. The entire project is.
Again, I'm going to reiterate something I said before, but I think it's worthy of repetition. And that is, you cannot do a disclosure by yourself. You cannot be one guy with insiders and act like all of the other research that's been done can just be overlooked, and those people can be overlooked.
Right.
If he really wants to get involved, he should accept an invitation to speak at Contact in the Desert, Conscious Life Expo,
right?
The places that we're all going, because there's only a few of them, right?
Right.
You got to pay that out. I have my security guards. I can't allow large crowds of people to try to talk to me because there's too many of them. So you get your security, but you got to show up. You got to make yourself available to the public. You can't just do a couple press conferences. So I invite him to get involved, and even and I understand the need for privacy, and I understand the PTSD you get. As I've said to you before, Jimmy, I'm friends with Steven Tyler. I've seen him in public. I've seen how he handles it. He's very cool. He's been a rock star for 40 years, and he's amazing. When people come up to him, he's totally relaxed, and he's always friendly. But that takes years and years and years to perfect, and it can be very difficult for people. I remember one time actually seeing Neil Young and Daryl Hannah in the health food store, and both of them were like totally freaked out about being in public and hoping that people weren't going to recognize them. And all that behavior actually made them far more conspicuous than if they hadn't acted that way.
No, right?
Right? So all I'm saying is, it's not a threatening thing to invite him to become more involved in this community. But what I am saying is, you can't jump into the community and still act like you're not involved. Part of being involved is showing up for these events. Part of being involved is talking to the people who are doing the research, interviewing these people, acting like they matter. So if I were him, and if he had some money to do this, one of the things I would recommend that he do is actually bring in some of the top people in UFOs and have an event, have a symposium where he's got panel discussions and where some of his insiders can start to say more, and then it can all be live cast, streamed on the internet. Now that's a big deal, because then he's bringing in other names, and then instead of it being softball questions that are pre-planned on a list like you get in the People's Republic of China, you got people on stage who are going to throw curveballs at these alleged insiders and ask them the questions that they might not have been prepared for with a written answer. That's the kind of stuff that we need to see for the community as a whole to take this as being the next big thing.
That's right. That's right. To accept it and to help push it forward. You got to have this community behind you.
And I want disclosure, man. I mean, if this is real, if the Hillary and Podesta thing is actually not the central point, and if the fact that they helped to initiate this does not reflect poorly upon the actual insiders, if you have good people from the military, from various defense contractors who want to tell the truth now, then, you know, instead of just trying to raise a bunch of money right now, they need to start on the grassroots level, because you got to give before you can ask, right? You have to give people something. So start an event that might only cost, you know, $10,000, $20,000 to put it on, maybe $50,000, $100,000 at the most, which he should be able to afford, or at least, you know, some benefactors could. You could probably crowdfund it in a couple days. Put on that event, let people see what you've got, give them some of what they want to hear, and then if you want to raise money, that's how you do it, right? You organize that kind of an event. And I totally think that's possible, and I encourage him to do that, because right now, unfortunately, he is greatly suspected by this community. I really have not heard positive things about this from anybody. Everybody is a conspiracy theorist. Everybody thinks that whatever you tell them is exactly the opposite. So if you tell them one thing, they're already looking for the hidden dagger under the pillow. They don't just believe you. They always think you're lying to them. So the way to counteract that is a live, unscripted event,
right,
where established people like you and me, Jimmy, can ask these guys questions,
right,
that are not scripted, and we see what they say and we see how they hold up. That's how they can win over this community.